I thought I had it all. A loving wife, a stable job, and a bright future. But one evening, coming home early, I found my world shattered. My wife was entangled in an affair with my best friend. My heart turned to stone as rage and betrayal consumed me. I stayed silent, but inside, I was plotting my revenge. Hidden cameras, stolen secrets, and a public humiliation at our company's gala. They thought they could break me, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. This isn't just infidelity, it's a calculated vengeance. Watch it unfold. Jim always wanted a happy and steady life. He grew up in a small town where family and hard work mattered a lot. He was proud of his simple home. He chose to become an engineer because he loved solving problems and wanted to build a secure future. Everything changed when he met Linda at a community event. They quickly fell in love and dreamed of starting a family together, wanting to raise their children in a loving home. But soon, Jim's perfect life began to fall apart. Linda started acting differently. She worked late and seemed distant. This made Jim worried and anxious. Even though he tried to fix things, Linda seemed uninterested, and their problems just kept growing. It all became too much, and their marriage ended painfully. Jim felt crushed and lost. His dreams were in pieces, and he was filled with sadness as he dealt with the betrayal he felt. He left Morrison's restaurant and went back to the hotel to get his things. He packed up, but left Linda's belongings behind. When he got home, it was so quiet. He cried in the living room, thinking of his kids, and felt more and more hopeless. He took a half-empty bottle of Chivas Regal, drank from it, and threw it into the fireplace, breaking their wedding photo. Enough of this, he said to himself. In his pain, he thought of revenge. Jim moved their savings into his account, took out $2,500, and left the rest. He wrote letters to his mother and Linda's parents, explaining what happened and his decision to leave. He also wrote birthday letters for Emma and Tommy, hoping Linda would see the truth. Jim packed a gym bag, showered, and got ready to go. He left a note for Linda that said, "Goodbye. Live without me. Let it be painful. Guess who?" He put his wedding ring on the table in his office, took important items like his gun and passport, and tore up their marriage certificate, pinning it to the wall with a knife and splattering it with ketchup. Afterward, he made coffee, filled the reservoir with water, and messed up the fridge and freezer. Feeling satisfied with his actions, he gathered his things and went to the garage. He opened the garage door and approached his weapon safe. Linda had never wanted a weapon in the house. She thought it was dangerous. He took out his Winchester rifle, his Weatherby .30, .06 rifle, and all the ammo. After locking the safe, he grabbed a sleeping bag, a two-person tent, a ground cloth, and fishing gear. He loaded everything into his truck, filled it with 2 5-gallon gas cans, and closed it. He thought of his children, feeling torn. Was this the right choice? He wasn't sure. He felt this pain would follow him for years. He got in the truck, threw the house keys on the floor of the garage, and drove away without locking anything behind him. As he passed by a TV, he remembered the Father's Day gift Linda and the kids had given him. It was a reminder of all he'd lost. He drove to see Stern, a family friend who thought of Jim as a son. After parking, Jim set his alarm for 8 a.m. and tried to sleep. The alarm woke him 6 hours later. He stretched, yawned, and sipped his cold coffee. He called LEW, knowing it was early, but he needed help. "Hello?" LW answered calmly. Jim said, "LW, I need your help. Can you come to the office with a notary? I'll explain when I see you." LW asked, "Is Linda okay?" Jim replied, "Not over the phone, please." LW agreed to come in an hour but warned Jim not to do anything crazy. 50 minutes later, LW arrived. They shook hands and went inside the office building. After a short elevator ride, they reached LW's office. While LW made coffee and checked messages, Jim sat down feeling nervous. LW asked, "What's going on?" Jim shared everything that happened over the weekend and this morning. By the end, he felt angry but tried to stay calm, thinking about his kids. LW listened and took notes. Finally, LW sighed and leaned forward. "Son, you were caught off guard. What do you want to do now?" Jim stared blankly and said, I want to leave them both, but they're not worth it. Should I just abandon her and the kids like she left me? LW asked. Jim said yes. I just want to leave. For the first time since the night before, LW chuckled, pulling Jim back to reality. What about the children? Are they even mine? Should I care for them if she doesn't? Jim replied, she only thought of herself. Well, I want to think of myself too. To hell with her. Shouldn't I show compassion? Not now. Will you help me? Can I just walk away and forget about her? It's not illegal, right? I left her over $15,000 and took nothing else. LW sighed again. He had never seen anyone so broken. This worried him more than his time in Vietnam or watching his wife battle cancer. Yes, we can do it, LW replied. She might file for divorce, but she'll have to find you, and your kids will suffer. Jim thought about this. He didn't want to see Linda again or hear her say it didn't mean anything. He said, let her deal with the consequences now, just like I had to. LW listened, tears forming in his eyes as he took in Jim's pain. Jim took a deep breath and sat up straight, picking up a pencil. Just then, his assistant Penny Wilson came in. She paused when she saw the serious talk, but LW waved her over. He introduced Jim and explained that they needed some papers signed. Penny nodded and went to get her tablet and coffee. We sat down, and I told her what was happening. She didn't judge, but I could tell she didn't feel good about it. We worked on the separation papers and a power of attorney for LW to sign. We also set up trusts with my mom and LW as the managers. I gave LW letters for my kids and shook hands with everyone. Penny offered a quiet, I'm sorry. I felt surprisingly calm. My life had changed a day after it really ended. As I left, the day didn't feel as heavy. It was still cloudy and sad, but not too bad. I didn't understand why I went to the bank, took out money from my savings and closed that account, leaving just enough in my checking account. Next, I went to my truck and filled up the tank, plus an extra tank and 2 5-gallon gas cans. Then, I found an internet cafe. I bought a coffee and a muffin. I uploaded files to everyone on my list, her parents, my mom, TV stations, and local newspapers. After that, I called the NFL Players Association to cancel our credit cards, saying they were stolen. When I finished my coffee, the weather was getting better. It was a chilly and gloomy March day in Cicero, just like how I felt about life. A little after 2 p.m., I started driving east for about 7 hours. I stopped at a simple motel and got a room. I woke up early the next day and drove for 6 more hours, finally arriving in Golden Beach, Maryland, by the Patuxent River. It felt like a summer town, but in early March there wasn't much to do. I parked in front of a small restaurant called Sally's and went inside. I needed to figure out where to go next. I grabbed a road atlas and walked in. It wasn't busy, just a few people and a large board with local ads. One ad caught my eye. A studio apartment for $135 a month, with utilities and internet included. No smoking or drinking allowed. I took the ad and sat at the counter. The owner, Sally, greeted me kindly. She asked what I wanted. I asked her about the ad. She looked me over without checking the ad and then asked if I was looking for a room and maybe work. Yes, and yes, I replied. She nodded and called someone on her cell phone. Hey, I have someone interesting here. You might want to talk to him, she said before hanging up. Are you hungry? How about a late lunch? I agreed and ordered a roast beef sandwich, salad with ranch dressing, and sweet tea. While Sally went to prepare my meal, I wondered how everything would turn out. The lunch was delicious, and I was finishing my coleslaw when the door swung open. A woman between 40 and 45 years old and a man around 60 to 67 walked in. The man was tall and sturdy, looking like he could be in a military poster. He led the woman to sit next to me, then took a seat on my other side, taking off his sunglasses and cap. Sarcastically, I said, "Please take a seat," pointing out the empty chairs around us. They seemed to be my interviewers. The man stared at me, but I didn't flinch. Then the woman spoke. "Hello, I'm May Lowell, and this is my husband Joshua. Say hello, Joshua," she said. He just studied me quietly. May offered her hand and I shook it. She asked, "What's your name? Where are you from? Why are you here?" I pulled out my driver's license and introduced myself, giving a brief summary of my situation without going into too much detail. May pressed on, asking, "Are you married?" I answered, "Yes, ma'am." And she continued, "And do you have children?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." I hesitated before she asked, "Where are they?" I replied, "I don't know and I'm not interested. I didn't do anything wrong. It may not be right, but I don't care. You have my driver's license. Check it if you want. But if that's the case, I'm leaving. I'm a man of my word. Maybe not a perfect man, but I've been through too much," I said firmly. May started to respond, but I interrupted her, saying, "That's enough, May." I turned to Joshua, who seemed to focus on me now. May stopped talking and Joshua began. "The rent is $150 a month, paid in cash," he said. "This is the last apartment available. The rent is going up because spring is coming and more people will want it, but I'll keep it at $150 as long as you're here. If you're interested, follow us to the house to take a look, and we'll shake hands." I raised my eyebrows and asked, "Shall we shake hands?" He nodded. "Yes, a man of his word," he replied. After a moment, I agreed. "Okay, let's go." I waved for the bill and Sally handed me a slip. It came to $5, $12, including tax. I left an $11 tip on the counter. "Thank you," she said, smiling at the locals. We stepped outside, and Joshua waved at two sheriff's deputies taking a coffee break. He pointed to a black Rubicon Sahara with big tires and a winch. "Follow us," he said, helping me into the vehicle. He gave a friendly smile before shutting the door and turned serious as he got in. I quickly followed in my truck. After about a 12-minute drive, he took a turn toward the river and drove down a private road that led to 10 bungalows on stilts. We stopped at the last blue house on the right. I parked in the designated spot and approached the locals. The cottage stood high with a staircase and a ramp leading up to a small porch. The ramp was well built, secured in concrete with surfaces to prevent slipping. I walked up the ramp to meet them, and they welcomed me inside. The place had a small hallway. On one side was the kitchen, and on the other side was a bathroom with a shower. The bedroom looked out over the river, while the living room faced the hills and forest. There were ceiling fans and a small fireplace, but no other ways to heat or cool the space. It felt cozy and warm. It was about 1,200 square feet, just right for a nice weekend. Jim turned to the locals and said, "I'll take it." But Joshua replied, "Hold on a minute, how will you pay for it?" "Do you have a job?" Joshua asked. "Not yet, sir," Jim answered. "What are you offering?" Jim asked. Joshua looked him over again, then glanced at me and back at Jim. "Maybe. What skills do you have?" Jim said, "I'm a licensed aircraft mechanic. I'm good at woodworking and driving a forklift." Joshua seemed to like that. "All right, how about minimum wage in cash? You can unofficially work at Hideaway Marina, just wear branded t-shirts with jeans." He added, "Local churches and charities might need help. Work with them directly for cash. Just don't take advantage of them, or you'll be out. Understood?" Jim smiled and said, "Loud and clear, boss." Joshua nodded and instructed, "Tomorrow morning, bright and early. Breakfast is at 6 in the restaurant in the long building. Come half an hour early and you can buy breakfast. Let's see what you can do." He extended his hand, and Jim shook it. Their adventure was about to begin. As time passed, Jim learned their stories and became close with them. Joshua was a Marine scout in Vietnam who saved Mai and her family. They were taken to the Philippines first, then to the United States with help from Catholic charities. Joshua grew fond of Mai, kept in touch with her, and eventually proposed to her in Oceanside, California. He converted to Catholicism, which made Mai's family happy, but not his own. After their wedding and a short honeymoon, they moved to Paris Island, even though her family didn't approve. Joshua had 2 tours of duty and retired as an infantry sergeant major, earning many honors. They had 4 children. 3 joined the Marines and 1 joined the Air Force. Their daughter served in the Marines, graduated from the Naval Academy, and became a lawyer. She started dating a pediatrician from Baltimore. Meanwhile, Jim focused on his work, building his strength and skills. He enjoyed the nice weather and got better at woodworking and mechanics. People in town began to like him, and he got officially hired and promoted by his new boss. He started a small business, hiring 2 young men, one was an ex-con and the other was a veteran, to renovate and build homes. Jim was accepted by the Lowell family and became a part of their lives. After 2.5 years, Jim was settled and earning nearly $20 an hour. He shared his story with the locals, surprising me. "How could a woman do that?" someone said. But she has children, Mai added. That means you have children too, and I care about them, Jim replied. But I'm unsure if they are really my children. It means I would have to trust a traitor. Joshua quietly observed Jim, saying, You're hurting, young man. I won't judge you, but you're at a dead end. Mai said, You made a choice and followed it, but you're still suffering and not trying to get better. Jim realized he was accepted into their family, but still felt broken. He had no social life outside of work, just a few friends at church. Linda had made him a recluse. She put her needs above the family's. He thought deeply about his choice to leave. 3 years later, still unsure, he knew he needed to change. One Sunday morning, while leaving a grocery store, he noticed 2 men trying to rob a young woman next to her Toyota Supra. She was screaming and fighting back, but no one was paying attention. Jim jumped in to help. He put his grocery bags on the truck hood and rushed toward them, pulling out his baton. Hey! He shouted to get their attention. I moved closer. One robber had a weapon, but I was ready to act first. I hit the robber's wrist with the baton with a sickening crack. I used my strength to push him into the other robber, pinning both of them against the car. The first robber screamed, and the second groaned in pain as they fell to the ground. I turned to the young woman who was about 5'3", had long brown hair in a ponytail, and wore librarian-style glasses. She was trying to open the back door of her car, still screaming. I called Mike Lowell, the second son of the Lowell family. Mike, we have a situation at the grocery store. Possible robbery and assault. Don't go, he said. I made sure the robbers didn't get away and walked to the woman. I opened the car door carefully, and she pulled out a small girl, about 4 or 5 years old. Are you okay? I asked her. The mother cried, but then calmed down and thanked me. They wanted to take my car and my child, she said. That won't happen, I assured her. Are you a policeman? She asked. I laughed a little. No, but I play one on TV. She looked doubtful as police cars arrived with sirens blaring. Mike and his partner jumped out, guns drawn. I raised my hands, holding my baton by the barrel. Mike took it for evidence. What happened, Jim? He asked. I briefly explained and then apologized for my joke. I introduced myself. Sorry for that, my name is Jim Carlisle. Is the baby okay? The woman looked at me with uncertainty. Paramedics came and checked on her and her daughter. They were in shock, but otherwise fine. The mother turned to Mike. Do you know this guy? She asked. Yes, he works for my dad and lives near the marina. He's a good guy, Mike said. She turned back to me. Thanks again. My name is Emma Lindell. I was surprised, thinking of my daughter, and Mike didn't realize the name was similar. Is Linda okay? I asked Emma, feeling dizzy as I hit her car. Mike supported me and shook me gently. Get a grip, Jim, Mike said to Emma. Jim had an ex-wife named Linda and a daughter named Emma. He had faced hard times before, but he was a good man. I felt moved by Mike's words. I straightened up, feeling awkward and stuttering. I started to apologize and tried to walk away, but Emma stopped me. Jim, Mr. Carlisle, it's okay. Just breathe and relax, she said. I took a deep breath, and Mike stepped back. A police officer came over to take our statements and personal details. Little Linda looked at me with wide eyes, probably wondering what was going on. Then Emma asked if I wanted to have lunch. Have you been to Sally's? She asked. Mike noticed me blush and smiled when I said it was one of my favorite places. Go have lunch, Jim. Take your time, he said with a smile as he left. I turned to Emma, who was watching me. So, what do you think? I'm a bit hungry and my daughter is probably starving too. And since you're a guy, I'm sure you're hungry too. Let's go, it's my treat. It's the least I can do to thank you. I hadn't felt this way in over 3 years, but I said yes. After I put the groceries in my truck, we walked to Sally's. Inside, Sally waved us to an empty table. Are you two going to ask for a hero discount? She joked. Emma laughed. Word travels fast, I'm Sally. Mike talked about what happened on the radio. Good job, Jim. I knew you were a good man, Sally said with a smile. 2 older men came in and walked over to our table. Hey, Sal, is the pie fresh? Asked the first man. I just took out 2 apple and 1 peach pie from the oven. Choose, Rufus. Rufus chuckled, took off his Vietnam veteran cap and shook my hand. Good job, young man. It's great to see you all stepping up. I heard he had a weapon, I said. I felt his warm handshake. The second man also shook my hand, praising my character. They nodded at Emma and little Linda, smiled for a moment, and then went to the counter. Sally looked thrilled with all the attention. "Looks like you two will be the talk of the town," she said. Emma laughed. "Can we get dinner, Sally, before his head gets too big?" I felt embarrassed and apologized. Sally suggested grilled chicken, fries, spinach, and a side salad. It was the Tuesday special, even though it was after 2:30 p.m., Emma agreed, adding mac and cheese and nuggets for her daughter. For the first time, I saw little Linda smile. When Sally went to place our order, Emma continued talking. She told me that Mike's sister and wife had been trying to set us up, hoping it would help me heal, but Emma only cared about her daughter and wasn't looking for a relationship. "I'm 29 years old, divorced for 3 years. My abusive husband died in prison last year. I was one of my sister's first clients when she started her business," she said quietly so her daughter wouldn't hear. "I'm an accountant, licensed in estate planning and certified in investments. I run a small company with my best friend and a notary. We've been doing well for over 3 years. I can't believe those thugs tried to rob or kidnap us." Tears started rolling down Emma's cheeks. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the reality of what had happened sank in. I crouched down and hugged her. Little Linda began to cry too, so I hugged her as well. I felt a sense of normalcy returning for the first time in over 3 years, even if it scared me. I looked at the kind woman and the little girl crying in my arms, wishing the moment wouldn't end. Sally noticed us and looked concerned. This time she wasn't smiling. She set down iced tea and apple juice on the table. I tried to explain, but Emma interrupted, saying it was just an emotional reaction from the day's events. Sally nodded and I sat back down, moving closer to Emma and her daughter. Sally winked as she walked away. I fixed my shirt, took a sip of iced tea, and turned to Emma. "Okay, it's my turn. Sorry for my reaction when you introduced yourself and your daughter. The names reminded me of my wife and daughter, and it threw me off. I'm sorry," I told her. I shared my story without going into the painful details. I explained that Linda had cheated on me and left, and although I wasn't proud of everything I did, I felt trapped and saw no other way out. Could I have done things differently? Maybe, but it wouldn't have changed anything. As I spoke, I felt lighter. Emma listened closely. Her eyes grew wide and serious as she took in my story. She felt like an impartial listener, which helped. Emma seemed to understand my pain and the steps I took afterwards. She then said, "I'm not like your Linda. I know what you went through, but you need to heal. Trust me, I know what that's like. We might see each other again someday." Soon our dinner arrived and we enjoyed the food while chatting about life in Golden Beach. Emma had lived there for over 4 years since her husband was arrested. Her daughter, Linda, was just over 5 years old. When we finished dinner, Emma thanked me again, gathered her things, and shook my hand, holding it a moment longer than usual before leaving me with the bill. I smiled. Sally approached, grinning. "Don't mess this up, honey. She's a real catch and worth the wait." I paid and headed home, feeling happier than I had in a long time. Weeks passed, and I ran into Emma a few times, even inviting her and Linda out for ice cream. I was starting to feel human again. The next morning, I arrived for breakfast at the Marina restaurant where we serviced small boats. On Thursday, I learned there would be a barbecue at the Lowell's house on Friday, and that I was invited. It looked like I'd be going to a barbecue on Friday. It was good that the grill wasn't on yet. I decided to take a nap on Saturday after a night out on Friday. That sounded good, right? On Friday, I woke up, had breakfast, and got ready for the day. The families who owned the boats came by and I showed them what we had done. I explained our hours and where the fuel station was. They were regulars who visited on weekends, but they didn't live nearby. Once everything was settled, I left work, cleaned up, changed into a fresh t-shirt and jeans, and went to the Lowell's house for the barbecue. The Lowell house was big and made of logs with a deck that wrapped around, a patio, a hot tub, a pool, a fire pit, and a barbecue pit. My friend welcomed me with a hug and a kiss on the cheek, then tossed me into the lively family gathering. Children were playing, and my daughter Angelina soon spotted me. She was a well-known lawyer, a former Marine, and close to a young doctor. "Jim, how are you?" she asked. "I've only met you a few times in the last 3 years, but I've heard great things about you. Can we talk?" "Sure," I said, caught off guard. She smiled and took my hand. Soon, Mike and his wife, Camille, who noticed my nervousness, joined us. They guided me to a small table under a shady tree. We sat down and I received hugs, handshakes, and a bottle of beer. "Why do women always pick wine?" I joked, taking the beer from Mike. "Just one, okay?" he said with a grin. "You need water too. I haven't even heard your story yet." How bad could it be? I thought. I'm not in trouble yet, so let's hear it. I turned to Angelina, who was smiling and seemed to enjoy the moment. When she got back home, she wanted to make you feel bad for leaving and hoped to bring you back. There was a panic when she thought you might have hurt yourself. She called for help, saying there was a bad smell. The police told her to wait, but she hung up and called her parents. When the cops arrived, they found her screaming about blood and a terrible smell. They put her in a police car while they looked around. About 20 minutes later, they came out looking confused and taped off the door. Angie was laughing, trying to hold back her amusement. "Jim, you really outdid yourself," she said. The police were annoyed. Her parents came and all chaos broke loose. Your messages spread fast, and they got overwhelmed with calls. News crews began to appear. "Well done, Jim," Mike said, stunned. "Wow," he added, looking at me in shock. Then Angelina continued. The police scolded her for wasting their time and left. Her parents took her inside to air the house out and scolded her for the mess. They got the whole story, and her mother was shocked while her father was angry at both of you. He told her to get a divorce. She waited months, spent the money you left, and finally 2 years later, the divorce was done. You've been free for 6 months now. She got into big debt, lost her house, her job, and started drinking. Her parents took care of the kids. Your mother sees them often, but Linda doesn't. Last week she went to rehab. Her parents were worn out. Her mother's health was getting worse, and her father was stressed out. The mood grew serious. Joshua and Mike joined us. Joshua said, "Your family knows everything now. Mike and I don't know much, but it's up to you what you want to share." His meaning was clear. It was your choice to talk. "You can't put this off any longer. Others are involved, and some want to help," he added. Emma stood close by. I wondered how they hadn't found me yet. I registered my truck, got a new driver's license, and I'm working here and even paid my taxes last year. Mike blushed. "I helped with that," he said. "When you changed your truck and license, I helped out at the DMV. The forms just went missing and weren't checked." He looked down, feeling shy. Angie added, "I filed your taxes for the first 2 years. You owe him a bit for taxes. Last year, he let you do it yourself, so no one noticed. Not the government, your in-laws, or the police. Maybe your mom did. She's upset and misses your dad." Emma squeezed my shoulder. I stared into her gray eyes and smiled. I realized I was a free man, supported by people who cared about me. I needed space to think. "Stop running, son. That time is over," Joshua said firmly. I smiled back, feeling renewed. "You're right. No more running. It's time for us to get our act together." I looked at Emma and pointed toward the river. "Can someone watch Linda while we take a walk?" Camille stood up. "Don't worry, Emma. She'll be fine." Emma thanked Camille, and Mike took my hand to lead me away. Angelina shook my hand, hugged me, and began to brief her parents about what had just happened. Emma and I walked along a path through the trees and found a nice spot by a fallen tree next to the river. She sat gracefully and patted the spot next to her, saying, "Sit down." I sat next to her. Emma looked away, paying attention to everything around us. She closed her eyes, smiling and taking deep breaths. This made me feel more at ease. Once I'd gathered my thoughts, I turned to her. "Emma, I need you to know all about me. I have to share my story." "Okay, I'm listening," she said, opening her eyes and looking at me. I took a deep breath and started talking. I told her about how a cruel woman had ruined my life. I shared the choices I had made, both good and bad, and how I had struggled for 3 years. I explained everything Angie had told us and a few personal details. I talked about how saving her and Linda changed me and how Emma's company made me feel better. When I finished, I felt nervous, unsure of what to do next. Emma looked at me with admiration and giggled. "So, you want to ask me to be your partner?" "You are such a good person and I admire your strength," she said, her eyes bright. I was surprised and a little shy, but I took her hands in mine. She held my gaze, waiting for me to speak. I swallowed hard and began, I want to ask Angelina to reach out to LW in Illinois to see if I can get my children back. She has a tough situation, so I hope mine can be better. I want to bring them here to live with my mom. But first, I need to build a house big enough for all of us. Emma blinked, clearly shocked. For once, I had thought ahead. So, do you have feelings for me? She asked. Yeah, I think so, I replied. And you think Linda and I can be part of your family? She pressed. I smiled and said, yes, I really like you. I think it could turn into love if we let it. Then I leaned in and kissed her softly. She looked happy and said, I am yours, and you are mine. That's it. She took charge. I know an architect who can help us plan the house at a good price because of his wife's friendship with me. And Angelina will reach out to Elle to take care of the custody issue. But we might have some legal fees, she added. We'll discuss that later. What do you say? She smiled widely. I rushed to her and she squealed with joy as we fell into a pile of leaves. After 45 minutes of laughing and kissing, we returned to the party, still dusting off leaves and grass. Joshua and Mia were now in the loop. We shared our plans, and they were supportive. Angie would be my lawyer at a family discount, and she planned to contact LW on Monday to start the process. I talked with Joshua about buying a lot to build a house with an extra space for my mom, connected by a covered walkway. The house would have 5 bedrooms. I also suggested renting my current place to Linda's parents if they wanted to live here with their kids. I wasn't sure how they felt about me, but decided to wait and see. Emma and I met with the architect to discuss our needs. He shared ideas, showing us plans on his laptop and giving an estimate. On Monday, I applied for a construction loan at the bank, and Angie reached out to LW to discuss my case. He warned me I might need to return to Illinois to handle things. I had almost 4 weeks of vacation saved, and Joshua told me to take all the time I needed. Family, he said. Angie came up with a special strategy for my case and discussed it with LW over Skype and email. Emma and I remained close, and Linda grew fond of me, always holding my hand and asking for goodnight hugs and kisses. I also got closer to her mother, though we had yet to take a physical step. One day, Linda surprised me by asking, when will you ask my mom to be with you? I need a dad, and you would fit the role, right? The court case turned out better than I expected. I hadn't done anything wrong, just questionable. Linda's parents were supportive of my plans. When Ilvi and Angie told them about my offer to move in, they were eager to chat and apologize. Things began moving. My small business, which started with odd jobs and home repairs, expanded to 2 teams. My home became something I took pride in. In 2 months, the structure was ready, and Emma, Linda, Angelina, Camilla, and Sally helped decorate. I received a court date for family court. Linda struggled after rehab, and Lovi and I began selling their house before it went to auction. I packed my truck, kissed Emma goodbye, hugged everyone else, and drove to Cicero. Angie said she would fly out soon for the trial. Returning home after almost 4 years felt strange. My neighborhood hadn't changed much, but my house looked messy. The grass was overgrown, paths were messy, one garage door was dented, another painted, and a window was covered with wood. I drove slowly on my way to my mom's apartment, eager to see her and apologize for worrying her. No need to worry, though. Mom met me at the door and hugged me tightly, kissing my cheek with tears in her eyes. I felt guilty and apologized, but her smile made everything feel right again. She pulled me inside, took my things to the guest room, and brought me coffee. She told me Elvie would arrive soon and we could all talk. All she wanted was to hug me. 2 hours later, Elvie arrived with Penny Wilson. He hugged my mom and introduced me to Penny. We got down to business. Angie was coming on Friday and the trial would start on Monday. Elvie told me the judge was strict but fair, someone who didn't like betrayal but had little patience for fathers who abandoned their families. He talked about Linda's lawyer and their likely strategies. They didn't plan for custody, child support, or spousal support, but Elvie was confident. Still, I felt like they were hiding something. On Friday, I drove to O'Hare to meet Angie, who greeted me with a smile. You said yes, I joked. She laughed, and I realized how much I missed moments like this. We went to my mom's house, and Angie was welcomed warmly. The next day, we visited LV's office, where we met with him and Penny after having coffee. We went over everything, and Angie updated us on her findings. Even though I felt something was missing, they reassured me all was well. Angie told me I was ready for the trial starting on Monday. I felt nervous but hopeful. I prayed and promised myself to go to church that Sunday night. I couldn't sleep because I was praying and worrying until I finally dozed off. I woke up early, went to morning mass, and spent the day thinking and praying. When I got home, my mom looked worried. I told her I just needed some alone time. It made me feel calmer. After a simple dinner, I went to bed feeling as ready as I could be. Monday came, cool and clear. The trial was set to start at 9 a.m. I got there early, found room 319, and said hello to LVY, Angie, and Penny. Then I saw Linda. She looked tired and worn out, with her 2 lawyers and our daughters, Dee and Jane. At first, she didn't see me, but then she noticed us. She looked terrible, thin and old, and no makeup could help. I felt a little proud, knowing that I was in good shape after all my hard work to stay healthy. She tried to come over to me, but her lawyers held her back and took her into the courtroom. Angie walked up to me and said, "She looks bad, Jim." I replied, "Yes." She continued, "It's sad." My answer surprised her, but she got it. Just then, the elevator opened again, and my mom and Linda's parents walked in. My mom hugged me, and then Linda's mom did too. Then Linda's dad reached out his hand. I stuttered a bit and said, "Linda just went in." Her mom said something that made me smile. "That's good, but we are here for you." Her dad added, "She had her chance. Now it's yours. Just be polite." I hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Dad." We walked into the courtroom, sat at the front table, and Linda's parents sat behind me. There were a few other people, including 2 reporters who looked bored. Linda's group kept looking at us. At 9:05, the bailiff called, "Here, here! Please rise for Judge Thomas Kincaid. The court is now in session. Case 213, James R. Carlisle versus Linda Kramer regarding the custody of 2 minors, Emma Louise Carlisle, age 12, and Thomas James Carlisle, age 9. The judge said that child and spousal support were also in question. "Please be seated," he said as he took his seat and banged the gavel once. "Thank you, bailiff. Are all the interested parties present?" Linda's lawyer stood and said, "Linda Kramer, defendant, Your Honor, I'm John Schultz, representing Miss Kramer." Then Louis Stern stood and said, "Louis Stern for the plaintiff, James Carlisle, Your Honor." The judge looked at Linda and said, "So, Kramer, your ex-husband is asking for custody of your 2 children and wants to take them out of state. Is that true?" Linda stood up and replied, "Yes, Your Honor. He thinks I'm not a good mother and wants to take my children away." The judge asked, "You are divorced, correct?" Linda answered, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge continued, "Why did you get divorced?" I nearly jumped out of my chair, but Lovie grabbed my hand and whispered, "Not yet." Linda started crying and said, "We were out with friends at Morrison's." Gemini tried to speak up, but LV shot up and said, "Objection, Your Honor." The judge asked, "On what grounds?" Elvi said, "Miss Kramer is lying." Schultz stood up and replied, "Your Honor, there is no need to attack my client's character. This is not important." The judge thought for a moment and said, "Objection sustained, but I want to know, Miss Kramer, what really happened." Linda turned pale and looked around, panicking. I can't. It's not what you think." Her lawyer stood up again and said, "Your Honor, there is no reason to bring up anything inappropriate." Elvi smiled. The judge raised an eyebrow and asked, "Inappropriate behavior?" "Yes, Your Honor," Schultz replied. The judge turned to Linda and said, "Miss Kramer, please explain." Linda shrank back, unable to speak. The judge then asked Levi, "Can Mr. Carlisle tell us what happened, Mr. Stearns?" Levi nodded and said, "I swear, Your Honor, he will tell the truth." Schultz shouted, "Objection! This is a biased view." The judge overruled him. The bailiff came forward with a Bible and said, "Put your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?" "I swear," I said. The bailiff continued, "Please state your name and address for the record." "James Carlisle, Hideaway Marina, Golden Beach, Maryland," I answered. "Thank you," the bailiff said. The judge looked at me and asked, "Mr. Carlisle, what happened that night?" I told the judge everything, from when we left home to when Linda went to the restroom and didn't come back. Looking at Linda, I said, "She left me without a word for another man. No explanation. So I went home and left her, just as she left me. I'm not proud, but I felt I had no choice. At least I left her a note. The courtroom was silent except for Linda crying. Then Linda shouted, "You left me and our children, you scoundrel!" I quickly replied, "Just like you did, Linda." The judge banged his gavel twice and said, "Order! If this continues, I will take action against both of you." Linda's lawyer was angry and didn't want this to be talked about. The judge leaned forward and said, "Miss Kramer, is Mr. Carlisle's story true? Please answer honestly." Linda, looking defeated, sighed heavily and admitted, "Yes, sir. Everything he said is true. I ruined everything." The judge then turned to me and said, "Mr. Carlisle, I understand your stress, but you left your family for almost 4 years. That is not good." I was angry when Angie stood up, pulled my arm, and took me to her seat. She looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, may I speak for Mr. Carlisle?" "Who are you?" the judge asked. "Maya Angelina Lowell. I'm Mr. Carlisle's lawyer from Maryland." Then Joshua Lowell leaned forward and said, "Your Honor, may I?" "Go ahead, Mr. Lowell," the judge said. Joshua straightened up and looked me in the eye. "Your Honor, when we first met James Carlisle, he was sad and feeling beaten down. But he didn't give up. He showed interest in one of our cabins. I decided to give him a chance, and he has changed a lot since then." Joseph added, "I haven't known Jim for long, but I agree with my dad. Jim is a good person." Joshua Jr. said next, "Your Honor, I think the same. From what I've seen, Jim is a good man. He would make a great soldier." Mike spoke up. "Your Honor, my wife and I have known Jim for 4 years. We trust him with our family's safety. My kids call him Uncle Jim. He became a hero in Golden Beach, saving a woman and her daughter from a robbery at great risk to himself." Sally was the last to speak. "Jim walked into my restaurant feeling broken. I could see he needed help. Now he is a wonderful man who has made great progress. I think of him like a grandson." She turned to my mom. "Mrs., you've done a great job raising him." Angie spoke as the doors opened. "There is one more person who wants to speak." Emma Lindell stepped up. I stood up, walked over, and stopped as she smiled. Addressing the judge, she said, "Your Honor, can I speak for this man?" Linda looked shocked and stared at Emma. "Yes, please. Who are you?" "I am the woman Jim saved from thieves in Golden Beach, Maryland, along with my daughter, Linda." The judge hit his gavel for silence. "Please continue, Miss Lindell. I've known James Carlisle for about 1.5 years. He is an amazing and honorable man." She glanced at Linda with slight tension. "I have become very close to him since he saved us, but nothing wrong happened between us. I wanted more, but until recently he thought he was still married, though his wife felt differently." Linda was furious, mumbling rude things to her lawyer as she tried to shout over everyone. The judge hit the gavel again and warned Mr. Schultz to keep his client calm. Linda sat down but kept muttering. Emma continued, "I was willing to wait for James to heal. This matter regarding his children is very important for his recovery. He is a good man, and I hope this works out for him. I will be here for him." A quiet pause followed. Then she said, "I love him, Your Honor." The judge raised an eyebrow and the room grew still. He cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Lindell. The court values your testimony." Linda yelled no and ran towards the exit. The judge told the bailiff to stop her, but she was already gone. Her lawyer asked for a break to speak with her. The judge announced a 2-hour lunch break and said we would resume at 2 p.m. Everyone stand. The bailiff called out. The judge left, shaking his head. I turned to Emma. "So you love me? I think you feel the same." She was shaking. "What?" she whispered. "Come on. You know I love you too." She smiled, her cheeks turning red. "Well, now I'm sure." I took her hands and kissed her softly. Our friends and family smiled and laughed at us. We went to a steakhouse for lunch. My lawyers were in a good mood, especially Angie, who was happy with how she did. I told her that if she ever wanted to leave Maryland, she could join my firm. At 1:45, we returned to court to find the defense team in a mess. Linda had disappeared. The judge ordered a warrant for her arrest, but the defense showed signed papers where she agreed to my claim and gave up all parental rights. I was shocked when Ivy and Angie explained what this meant. Ivy said, "None, son. You won. She gave you everything. You're already divorced. That's it." Angie put her hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Jim. Accept it and move on." She asked for nothing. It was all finished, and I had won. But at what cost? I still needed to pick up my kids from school. They didn't know what was happening, but that would soon change. 2 reporters, one from the Cicero newspaper and one from the Chicago Sun-Times, tried to talk to my ex-wife, but she was nowhere to be found. I told them we would make a statement after looking over the papers. It might take a day or two. Hopefully something else will come up and we won't be in the news anymore. He laughed. We went to get the kids. Emma, who was now 12, and Tommy, who was 9, ran out of the school, saw their grandparents, and then me with a woman they didn't recognize. They stopped in their tracks, then rushed toward me with joy. "Daddy, Daddy." They hugged and kissed me. "We missed you. Where were you? Why didn't you call? What happened? Why was Mom so angry? Where is Mom?" They hadn't heard anything yet. I hugged them while Emma Lindell waited nearby. I pointed to her. "This is Mrs. Lindell. She's a good friend of mine. Let's go home with your grandparents, see some friends, and have lunch." They agreed and grabbed their backpacks. We went to their grandparents' house, and the kids joined the backyard fun. Then came the tough part. After everyone ate, I gathered the kids for serious talks with their 3 grandparents, Ivy, Angie, and Emma Lindell. I explained to the kids that their mother had left. We didn't know where, but she was gone. They felt a bit angry, but seemed used to her disappearing. This was one reason their grandparents had asked for custody when Linda started acting strangely. They had a good life with their grandparents, who provided love and stability while my mom was there a lot too. "So here's the deal, kids. I went to court for custody and your grandparents are with me. I won and your mom agreed. You have a choice. You can move with me or stay with your grandparents. It's up to you. I'll answer your questions when you're ready, but some things might be hard to understand right now." I said my daughter spoke first. "She cheated on you, didn't she, Dad? Different men every few weeks." "It was gross," Tommy added. "Mark was the worst. It was hard not to feel for them." The air grew still as Emma Lindell squeezed my hand. Tommy asked, "Is she your friend?" I blushed and said, "Yes." Emma tripped a little. Then little Emma laughed and said, "Oh yes, she's definitely his friend. My name is Emma, too." She looked at my friend Emma. Big Emma replied, "But my friends call me Emma." "I like that," little Emma said. "My real name is Emily, but I like Emma, too." My son watched closely. He turned to me and said, "I think she is nice, Dad. What do you think?" "I think so too, son," I replied. We talked about many things over the next 2 days. I told my in-laws and my mom about the house I built and asked them to sell their houses and move to Maryland. The kids were excited about moving, especially when they found out their grandparents would move too. The older folks liked this idea. They wanted a change. We got everything ready after Linda left. Elvie helped my mom sell her house. She had a garage sale, gave things to charity, and packed what was left. My in-laws put their house up for sale and did the same with their stuff. They rented a truck and packed it up. The kids finished school and we got all the papers ready to move to Maryland. I stayed to help. We drove back with the kids and my father-in-law in one car and my mom and I in the truck. After one night in motels, we arrived in Golden Beach. Camilla arranged for counselors at the school, but the kids seemed to be doing well. We showed everyone our new house. My father-in-law's place was just a 5-minute walk away. After looking at our house and choosing bedrooms, we went to see their new home. Camilla and I showed them around and gave them the keys. They loved it. While everyone chatted, I walked back to my house where Emma and Linda were talking on the porch. My daughter met me with a curious look and asked, "So, will I have another sister besides the new mom?" I said, "Yeah, I guess. Didn't I tell you?" She laughed and hugged me. Tommy said he now understood why there were so many bedrooms, but he looked away. We needed to watch him. We unloaded my in-laws' things, then my mom's items that had come a few days before. I thanked everyone, took them out to dinner at Sally's, and checked my bank account. It was time to get back to work. Life went on as the kids got used to their new surroundings. Linda fit in quickly and our family adjusted well. Tommy and I became closer, bonding over the idea of us against them. The kids did great in school and would start the next school year on track. Emma and I got married in mid-August in a small ceremony. We had our honeymoon in New Orleans. I was working on rebuilding my business, but we mainly enjoyed our time at the hotel and the restaurants. There was still no news about Linda. With help from friends, family, and a loving new wife, I rebuilt my life. I'm happy. Was my choice years ago the right one? Maybe. I think it was the best choice I could make. I'm lucky, that's for sure. As you watch the devastation unfold, you might wonder, what drives a person to betray their loved ones so deeply? Is it greed, desire, or something more sinister? Just when you think you've seen the worst, another story emerges, equally chilling and poignant. Imagine a man, deeply in love, only to find that his world is shattered by betrayal in the most unexpected place, a college campus where secrets lurk in the shadows of the library. Stay tuned as we delve into another tale of deception, love, and the quest for truth. During my second year in college, I was a typical nerd. I was focused on math and didn't pay much attention to the social scene. I liked spending time in quiet spots at the library, away from the noise of campus. I was deep into my studies, believing that my passion for learning left no room for dating. One night, I went to a party against my will and ended up sitting alone with a beer. I felt out of place. Then, out of nowhere, Tracy, the most beautiful girl on campus and the one I secretly admired, came over to talk to me. She was stunning and caught everyone's eye, yet she chose to sit with me. We hit it off instantly and soon became very close, getting married right after graduation. "Oh my goodness, Mark, you're the best!" Tracy said with excitement. Her words flattered me, but they also made me uneasy. After almost 30 years of marriage, why was she comparing me to other men? This thought hit me like a punch. We were having a cozy moment, and her comment was unsettling. "Mark, you really surprise me," Tracy said. With my head resting on her lap, I stayed silent. Tracy looked down at me and asked, "Aren't you going to say anything?" I replied, "No, I'm tired, love. You wore me out." She kissed me and lay back down. Normally, we would snuggle a bit before cleaning up, but Tracy fell asleep fast. I tiptoed to the bathroom to wash up and then went downstairs for a drink. Having a sharp mind can be both a blessing and a curse. Most men might have brushed off Tracy's comment, but I couldn't let it go. As I sipped my rye whiskey, I tried to think of any problems in our marriage, but nothing came to mind. Things had been better since our youngest child left for college 6 months ago, and Tracy had lost 20 pounds, looking even more attractive at 120 pounds again. At 51, she had the body of a goddess, with a great shape inherited from her mother. Her beauty had hardly faded with age. We met in college, dated for 2 years, and married when we were 22. I never worried much about her flirtatious nature until now. She believed her looks could charm any guy, but I had never been bothered by that before. Tracy had always stood out, even once at work when she accidentally interrupted a meeting, making everyone laugh. Since she was 14, Tracy had always attracted attention. Even after gaining weight, she still looked good at 51. She considered Rhonda, a 26-year-old coworker, a friend. However, she felt Rhonda's comment about a cheesecake was out of line. There was a new agent in the office, Carl, who was good-looking and fit. Tracy noticed him, but reminded herself that she was happily married. Tracy skipped lunch with her friends to hit the gym near her office. "She'll pay for this later," she thought as she drove away. As I sat in my study with my third drink, my thoughts drifted back to when Tracy and I first met at a big university. I was the math nerd who worked out, and she was a goddess. Goddesses don't date geeks. I knew who she was, but I never talked to her. I saw her at parties surrounded by guys trying to get her attention. I admired her from a distance, never daring to approach her when so many handsome men were around. A few weeks later, I was sipping a beer at another party when someone sat down next to me, pulling me from my thoughts. To my shock, it was her, the girl of my dreams. "So, are you straight or what?" she asked. I was embarrassed, unable to think clearly. She was even more beautiful up close. "I'm straight. I just thought you had no time for someone like me," I stammered. "Well, you need to be more open. Girls like a bit of mystery," she said. We left the party together and married soon after graduation. I knew Tracy was more popular than I was, but I also knew how to make her happy. On our first night together, I made her very happy, and I still could do that today, even if she seemed less interested lately. But tonight felt different. Tracy and I hadn't been intimate for 2 weeks, the longest since we had our kids. She often had excuses like being tired or not in the mood. I eventually stopped asking. As she washed a pot in the kitchen, I approached her from behind, touching her gently. She tried to push me away, but I kept trying until I led her to our bedroom. I quickly undressed her, but instead of her usual playful responses, tonight she talked more than usual. She seemed to enjoy it, but her comments about my skills took me by surprise. A couple of weeks after that incident in the break room, Tracy began making moves on Carl. They were working on a deal together, which gave her a good reason to invite him over for dinner. It seemed like business, just like when she invited other agents to discuss work since she was the senior agent and top producer. This time, she made sure Rhonda was aware of their dinner plans. After discussing business, Tracy turned on her charm. Over wine, she learned about Carl's past in football and his personal life. He mentioned having a girlfriend, but they weren't exclusive. Tracy often touched his arm and leaned in close, making sure to show off her outfit. She could see Carl liked her attention, which only boosted her confidence. Men are so easy, she thought. He doesn't even know what's coming. She was determined to lose another 5 pounds, and then she would get his attention. The private investigator I hired was proving to be worth the money, even if it was cutting into my vacation fund. His findings showed that Tracy was often with Carl Walters and a guy named Fred Lazarus, who was her gym trainer. The investigator looked nervous sharing the report, making me wonder if he was also involved with my unfaithful wife. I'm not a total nerd, but I have made different friends over the years. One of my oldest friends is a lawyer named Martin Boland. Like me, Marty is a smart guy. If I ever needed help with the law, I knew Marty would be there for me. He might not look tough, but he is fierce in court. We both agreed that Tracy needed to face the consequences for her cheating. We did not live in a place where cheating did not matter, so I didn't want her to hide behind, "We just don't get along." Tracy first said she would be with Fred Lazarus just one time. Fred was engaged to Rhonda and had insulted her. Tracy wanted to show Rhonda what a real woman's body looked like, keeping it a secret. Tracy enjoyed the idea of smirking at Rhonda for a long time, but Fred's size and the way he made her feel changed her mind. So she spent more time with him, making excuses to see Fred instead of Carl or be away from me. Then there was Darren Tremble, her gym trainer. Tracy was drawn to his strong body during a one-on-one training session. When he put his hands on her shoulders, it made her feel something special. Soon they went to his apartment, quickly removing their clothes. Tracy came home 30 minutes late, still in her workout clothes. I walked in 5 minutes later. She hurried to shower and started dinner, trying to act like nothing was wrong. Knowing about her trainer and seeing her new fit body, I thought she just had a long workout. She looked scared and avoided our usual greeting, saying she needed to wash off the sweat. Her excuse might have worked, but I had my private investigator's report. Even though I was angry, I stayed calm. That night, while Tracy put away dishes and I watched TV, the doorbell rang. She called me to check, but I noticed it was a process server. I asked her to open the door. She laughed, but then staggered into the room holding a manila envelope. "What the heck?" she said, looking at the opened envelope. "How could you do this to me? What about our family?" "You're just mad. I got to you first," I replied calmly. "Given time, you would have done this to me. You don't love me anymore. I know about your affairs." My voice shook. Tracy's face changed from shock to anger. "You think you know what's going on? Go ahead, tell me, I'm listening." "Carl Walters, Fred Lazarus, and Darren Tremble." I pulled out a small piece of paper. Tracy looked like she'd been hit. She sat down, realizing I had more than just ideas. "If you were braver, we wouldn't be having this talk," she spat back at me. I sighed. After 29 years, it sounded like loyalty didn't matter. None of those guys were even alive when we got married. Her eyebrows raised, realizing I was on to more than she thought. She looked ready to fight, but then hesitated. "I'll let you stay in the house until we sell it. You can tell the kids and your parents," I said softly. I stood up and grabbed 2 packed suitcases from the hallway closet. She looked shocked. "I'll come back in a few days for the rest of my things. Get a lawyer. Decide what you want and call Marty. You obviously don't care about me anymore, so let's end this quickly." I had no idea what was going on as I left. Although Mark had been right about Tracy wanting a divorce, she wasn't ready. She was trying to figure out how to make him look bad. She knew their friends would quickly side with him. For the kids, she planned to attack his manhood, hoping they'd get her need for excitement and passion. Mark's reaction surprised her, as it seemed like he didn't care much when he got the divorce papers. She was shocked at how well he took it, like he almost enjoyed the situation. I felt proud. Leaving with my suitcases, I could see Tracy was taken aback. I checked into a nearby motel ready to start fresh. Tracy fought hard about one thing in the divorce. She wanted to change the reason to irreconcilable differences instead of cheating. Even though she would get half of everything, it wasn't just about the money. She probably wanted to twist the story to make me look bad in front of the kids and her parents. Keeping the cheating claim gave me some power over the situation. "There's no need for everyone to know our personal business," she shouted over the phone one night. "Change it to irreconcilable differences and I'll sign right away." "Tracy, I know geeks can be socially awkward, but your reasoning doesn't work. I won't let you lie to avoid this. You chose to cheat while we were still married, and now that's public. All you had to do was respect me enough to divorce me first." Tracy tried to make me look bad by spreading rumors that I was not good in bed. Friends told me she said that from their wives. She thought I would back down to avoid being embarrassed. The hardest part was when my youngest daughter, Allison, accused me of following Tracy to make myself feel better. "If your mom wants to play dirty, fine. I said she probably told you about her affair, but did she mention she's with 3 guys a little older than you?" 3, I stressed, holding up 3 fingers. "I may not be young, but I can still take care of myself. This is not about me. Your mother has become selfish. 3 guys, Allison." "Doesn't she love me anymore?" she asked. "That's fine, but she didn't need to be with 3 people who are closer to your age. Not her." Allison looked shocked, stuttering and crying in my kitchen. I had never spoken so harshly about Tracy in front of her. Allison left my apartment looking lost and confused. I wanted to comfort her, but I held back. 20 minutes later, Tracy's mother, Barb, called me. We hadn't talked since I filed for divorce, but we used to have a great relationship. "How could you say such awful things to my granddaughter?" Barb yelled over the phone. "She used to adore you, and now she's crying on my couch. How could you say such terrible things about Tracy? Mom, listen. You only heard one side, not mine. Tracy's with 3 other guys. I have proof if you don't believe me." Barb gasped. "Oh my God, Mark, do you have photos? Videos?" "Yes, Mom," I said softly. I didn't want to share too much, but Tracy left me no choice. "No, Mark, that's not needed. I'll talk to her. 3 guys? I'm so sorry, Mark. Really?" She hung up the phone quietly. I shook my head when I ended the call. Barb had been like a mother to me since my dad passed away 12 years ago. We used to discuss my problems, but now I had to tell her Tracy was cheating, which hurt her. The divorce was granted after a year because of Tracy's unfaithfulness. I figured Tracy was still seeing those 3 men, but I wasn't keeping track anymore. Life got interesting for me about a month after I filed for divorce. 2 women from the university's science department came to check on me, even though I barely knew them. It was nice of them to care. They were both attractive. One was in her 50s and divorced, and the other was in her 40s and widowed. Over the weeks, many other women from campus stopped by to see how I was doing. One day, while leaving my office, the administrative secretary from the math department smiled at me brightly. "Okay, Colleen, what's going on? Did I win some money?" "You really have no idea, do you?" Colleen, a 35-year-old divorced woman with dark hair and green eyes, teased. For the first time, I noticed how pretty she was. "It's because you lost weight, Mark," she said, pointing to her ring finger. "You lost 120 pounds. You were always a nice guy, but now that you're single, it's open season. Good guys like you are hard to find, smart, kind, and single. Someone saw the divorce papers, and now everyone knows around campus. But the divorce isn't done yet. I won't be free for a few months. Everyone wants you to know they're interested. By the way, I'm applying to Dr. Robertson." "Okay, I'll put your application in the stack." "Really? You're so charming." Tracy thought I wouldn't talk about what happened, but within 2 weeks, everyone knew. That talk continued until the divorce was finalized a year later. "Are you crazy, Tracy? How could you let a great guy like Mark go?" Marge, Tracy's oldest friend, asked her a month after I filed. "Oh no, how does she already know?" Tracy thought she had time before telling anyone. Marge lived 2 hours away. Someone must have told her. "Okay, it's a long story," Tracy replied, trying to explain. "I heard from my mom after she broke down at Walmart last week," Marge said. Marge had called Barb Mom since 2nd grade. When she asked Barb about Tracy, Barb got nervous and cried, sharing everything. You cheated on a wonderful man because you thought you deserved better? What about him? You're getting older, too. Have you thought about that? Marge shouted. I always knew you were a bit selfish, but I never thought you'd show it to Mark right before the divorce. Meanwhile, I sat in my apartment eating a small salad and sipping bourbon. Tracy invited Carl to a fancy dinner, and later they went back to his place. This happened many times over the past year. But this time, Tracy felt different. She didn't like what was happening, but she wouldn't admit it to herself or to him. When it ended, she told him she was tired and needed to go home. She carefully pushed Carl's hands off her and got dressed. As she got into her car, she thought how her first night as a divorced woman was not what she hoped for. I can solve puzzles in my head and read 4 books at once, but I don't understand women, I told Judy Scalise, a longtime friend of ours, during my first date 2 weeks after the divorce. I picked Judy because she was a friend, and I thought it would help avoid confusion. I thought I understood women, but I guess I was just fooling myself for 30 years. What should I do next? Judy was an artist, and I admired how she thought about things. She was a few years younger than me and stayed fit with yoga, which kept her looking young. She had dark brown hair and blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. I started to have thoughts about her being more than a friend. I hoped you'd call, Mark, she said. I didn't think I'd be your first choice, so I'm very flattered. But let's not waste time talking about you and Tracy. We can chat about that over coffee later. Let's just focus on ourselves for now. I nodded. I agreed. You can't move forward if you keep looking back. Then, I leaned in and kissed Judy gently. She stood up and leaned across the table, kissing me back with more passion than I expected. I was taken aback, but I enjoyed it. Before that night, I hadn't considered Judy in a romantic way. She was lovely, and I appreciated how she looked, but I hadn't thought about other women while I was married. Firstly, I was married, and secondly, I thought I was with someone perfect. But now, I felt out of touch and knew I needed to find my way again. I don't think my face returned to normal until we finished eating, but I tried to stay calm and relax. I think I had a good conversation with Judy. We shared a slice of cheesecake and both had coffee for dessert. Then she suggested we go back to my place for a nightcap. Judy looked into my eyes and said, If I remember right, you haven't been with anyone since Tracy, right? I'd like to be your first after her. I know this sounds silly, but I was worried about being with Judy. It had been a long time, and I wasn't sure I'd last long. Plus, I would need time to recover since I wasn't as young as I used to be. And since Judy was a friend of both Tracy and me, I didn't want everyone to know if things didn't go well. Dr. Markland Robertson, a smart professor at the university, is a loser in bed. I could see people thinking that Tracy was right to leave me because I wasn't good where it counted. When we got to her place, Judy made coffee and then went to change into something more comfortable. My head was spinning. She returned wearing a robe that looked very cozy, but it was short. It was clear that she wasn't wearing a bra. I was definitely noticing this. We sat on her couch, sipping coffee and chatting like friends. I tried not to stare. Wake up, Mark, I heard Judy's voice in my head. Oh no, am I staring? I thought. Judy gently took my coffee cup and put it down. Then she quietly led me to her bedroom. I was barely thinking as she helped me take off my clothes. Whoa, slow down, I whispered, trying to gather my thoughts. It had been a long time, and I didn't want it to end too quickly. Relax, Mark, I understand, Judy said softly. We can do this again. I'm patient, but, I said, lifting her robe. I think things went well. Did you really have to be this charming? Judy said, half joking as we lay together, looking into each other's eyes. Well, that's the plan, right? I replied. Oh my gosh, Mark! Judy moved closer and turned her back so I could wrap my arms around her. We fell asleep and I slept so well before waking up to the wonderful feeling of Judy next to me. Good morning, I said happily. Good morning to you too, she replied. You are one of a kind, she said, looking straight at me. A month later, Tracy and Judy met for lunch at one of their favorite places. Tracy called Judy knowing she wanted to talk about my relationship with Judy. Judy had seen me a few times and knew Tracy's call was not just a coincidence. They spent the first few minutes catching up on life and their kids before Tracy finally got to the main point. So, lots of dates, huh, Judy? Tracy said, sipping her drink. Judy felt a little shy as Tracy spoke. Although she expected it, she felt more uneasy than she thought she would. What she thought would be a one-time thing had turned into something deeper. When Mark took her on dates, it was a wonderful experience. This guy really knows what he's doing, Judy thought. Is he always this good? Judy asked, sounding like a fan. Tracy was surprised by Judy's feelings about her ex-husband. She thought Mark wouldn't try as hard with someone else as he did when they were together. Judy's reaction showed that Mark had impressed her. How could you let him go? Are you nuts, little sister? He's smart, handsome, sweet, and amazing, Tracy said. Tracy quickly changed subjects, and Judy saw she wasn't happy with Judy's praise of Mark. Molly Hamilton was next to me, her hand on my chest as she slept. We had just had an intense time together. I felt great, but also worn out. I felt bad that I couldn't understand women. My ex-wife left me saying I couldn't please her, yet I just had some great moments with Molly, the third woman I'd been with in 3 months. I couldn't make sense of it all. Molly worked as an assistant in a medical office. It sounds like a cliché, but I met her at the gym. She was really focused on her workout. I usually notice cute girls and move on, but she was serious about her fitness. I waited until she finished and went to her locker to introduce myself. I hadn't dated much since my divorce, and something about her commitment in the gym drew me in. I asked her out for coffee and dessert one evening. She thought for a moment, but then agreed and gave me her number. We smiled, and I couldn't help but admire her as she walked out of the gym. I called her, and okay, this might seem pushy, but I asked, "How about Thursday evening?" She turned and smiled as she looked at me through the glass door. "Okay, this Thursday at 7 at Laszlo," she said. That made the rest of my workout feel amazing. I showed up at Laszlo a little early, found a nice table in the back, and ordered cheesecakes. Less than 2 minutes later, Molly arrived. Her long blonde hair was tied back in a ponytail. She wore tight jeans and a t-shirt that didn't go all the way down to her shorts. She was proud of how her stomach looked from working out at the gym, and I couldn't blame her. It really was impressive. Her chest looked a bit small, but it matched the rest of her body. If it were bigger, she might have gotten too much attention since she wasn't wearing a bra, and it was noticeable when she walked over to me. I was seated at a high table, so Molly had to sit up to get in her chair as I held it for her. When she sat down, her top moved a little, and I caught myself looking. She noticed and raised an eyebrow, so I smiled and nodded. We enjoyed cheesecake, drank coffee, and talked for 2 hours. I found myself really interested in this woman who wasn't much older than my daughters. I wasn't sure if she liked me as much, but she agreed to go out with me again the next Saturday. We went to the antique car museum first, then ate at a restaurant. After that, we went back to my apartment. The rest, as they say, is history. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, an older man was still going strong while his friend Mark was falling asleep. Tracy was with a young man she had met earlier that night. She wasn't enjoying herself as much as she thought she would. "Shouldn't this be more fun?" she asked herself as she got into her car to drive home. She took a quick look in the mirror. Even though she looked good, something felt off. A month ago, her boyfriend Carl had broken up with her. He wanted to date someone who wanted marriage and kids, things Tracy couldn't offer him. Carl was kind and honest when they split, but now Tracy realized she had been dumped for the second time in a row. First Mark, then Carl. She tried to tell herself that maybe it was for the best, saying that things with Carl had become boring. Why is this happening to me? She thought deeply as she drove into her driveway. She decided that the next time she went out, she might look for someone closer to her age. They might not be as attractive, but maybe she would actually enjoy their company. Being with Molly made me think again about Tracy. From my past experiences, I felt Tracy wasn't as skilled in bed as others I had been with before. I believed it was because she was beautiful, and she knew it. Women like Tracy usually don't need to try hard to attract guys, which might explain why she didn't work very hard at it. Men often felt lucky just to be with someone so pretty. But over time, that excitement fades, especially if the woman isn't giving much back. Tracy and I had talked about this lightly, but I never managed to tell her the truth. So I just accepted it because I cared for her. But women like Judy, Katie, and now Molly showed me what great connections could feel like. As I got into bed and started to sleep, I wondered if Tracy had fooled me again. 2 weeks later, I answered the phone and was surprised to hear Tracy's voice. I hadn't spoken to her in months. My daughters never brought her up because they knew I wouldn't talk about her. I wanted them to love and respect their mother, but I also made it clear that my relationship with her was over. April, my daughter, wanted to know if we could all get along at her wedding. Robert had finally proposed, and she wanted us there as long as we kept things civil. I hadn't heard from April yet, but I assured Tracy that I would behave. The next day, April called to share her good news. I told her what I had told her mother. She mentioned that Tracy would help plan the wedding, and I encouraged her to enjoy every moment, promising to cover the costs. I'm not usually a sentimental person, but walking April down the aisle left me speechless. My little girl, who once loved dolls, had grown up into a beautiful woman. The walk down the aisle was quick, but in those few steps, hundreds of memories flashed in my mind. As I handed her over to Robert at the altar, tears of joy rolled down my face. I joined our family and stood near Tracy, who leaned over to kiss me on the cheek. She was also crying. We danced a waltz for the father-daughter dance, and I felt it went well. Robert and his mother then shared a dance. After that, the music changed to something more modern, and the hall filled with younger guests. I stood by the bar for a while, sipping a drink before I decided to approach Tracy. She was dancing slowly with a young man when I walked over and asked to join. He looked a bit surprised, but Tracy smiled and reached for my hand, making it easy for him to step back. "Do you really trust me around these young guys?" Tracy teased, giving me a playful look. "Thanks to you, everyone thinks I'm a flirt. That young man was hoping to impress me and go home with the mother of the bride. If that's what you want, I could always bring him back," I joked in return. I responded, "But I thought you'd rather talk and dance with someone who doesn't look up to Beyoncé." "Touché," she said. "Well, unless you plan to attack me on the dance floor, I think we've done pretty well this weekend." I should agree, but for a moment, I thought April might have a panic attack when you walked over to me, I admitted. Tracy laughed. "We haven't been very grown up with each other lately," I said. "But at least we waited until they left before we lost it," she replied. We danced to a few slow songs before the music got faster. Her dance partner came back and politely asked if he could join her. Tracy seemed surprised when I agreed. Ellie joined me at our table, watching her mother dance without looking away. She jokingly asked, "Do you think I'll have to worry about boys chasing her when she's in a nursing home?" I glanced at my daughter, not wanting her to catch me checking her face. She was joking, but her eyes told me she meant it. "But what about you, Dad? Mom says you date sometimes, but finding someone to replace her seems impossible." "I'm okay. Actually, better than okay," I replied. "Your mom doesn't know as much about my life now as she thinks, but let's just say I have no problem getting attention from women, and I'm not trying to replace her. I can take care of this if I want to." Just then, Wendy Adams, an old family friend, came to our table. Wendy and her husband Earl had been friends with me and Tracy since the kids were little. Earl died a few years ago from cancer. I know Wendy and Tracy still keep in touch. I don't see her much because Earl and I were best friends. Wendy was a bit younger than me, and from how her dress fit, I could tell she took good care of herself. I invited her to sit with Allison and me, but she just smiled and asked if Allison could excuse us while we danced. Allison seemed surprised at first, but then kindly told us to go ahead as we moved toward the dance floor. Allison grabbed my hand and leaned in to whisper, "Coincidences like this only happen in movies, Daddy." We danced to a couple of songs, then went to the bar and sat in some comfy chairs right outside the room. We talked for a bit, then Wendy took my hand, looked me seriously in the eyes, and asked the big question. "Are you still in love with her, Mark? Because if you are, then I don't want to embarrass myself by asking you to dinner." I never expected that. I thought Wendy was really close with Tracy, so I never even thought about asking her out. Even though Wendy was pretty, I always thought Earl was lucky to have her. I was surprised she hadn't found someone new right away after mourning. I will always love her to some extent, but it's not the same. "Maybe it's like a bad habit," I said. "I care for her, but I'm not in love with her, and I don't want to cause any problems between you two." I remembered that one of Wendy's best traits was her frankness. She quickly reminded me, "Mark, I'm not a young woman anymore, and I've been alone for 8 years. There aren't many men I'm interested in, so I'm not going to say no to someone who's right here." "Tracy let you go? It's been, 3 years since your divorce? I know you're dating. You're like the top pick in the fantasy husbands league. If only we had one of those. So I won't lose any sleep worrying about what Tracy thinks about us dating." She blushed when she said the last part. Suddenly, I really wanted to help her get back into dating, so to speak. I handed her my phone, and she entered her number. As I was getting my phone back, April and Robert came out of the hall looking for me. April knew Wendy and chatted with her for a bit before Wendy said I needed to return to being the father of the bride. I walked up to Wendy, took her hands, leaned down, and quickly kissed her on the lips. "To be continued," I said quietly as Wendy blushed. We went through all the usual wedding activities, including cutting the cake. Tracy was pretty much glued to me for the rest of the night. I thought maybe April told her about my talk with Wendy, and I guessed there was a bit of jealousy on her part. I was a little flattered, even if it was 3 years later. When April and Robert went back inside, April told Tracy they had just interrupted Mark and Wendy, who seemed to be having a cozy moment. She mentioned they kissed when they parted. Allison told Tracy she had been watching Wendy and me dance, and that Wendy looked like a young girl in love. Allison thought it was sweet. From the look on Tracy's face, she didn't think it was sweet at all. After making sure everything was okay at the end of the night, Tracy and I found ourselves alone in the hotel lobby. I knew she came by taxi, so I offered to give her a ride home. She agreed, but only if I let her buy me a drink at the hotel bar. Since it was the best Tracy and I had gotten along in years, I agreed, and we walked to a low table at the bar. "The lady will have bourbon on the rocks, and I'll just have a soda," I told the waitress when she asked for our order. "It's nice that you still remember, Mark," Tracy said. "You're still the only woman I've ever seen who knows how to drink whiskey properly," I replied. "Are you going to have fun with Wendy Adams?" she suddenly said, putting her hand to her cheek and blushing when she realized what she had blurted out. "I didn't mean to say it like that," she stammered. "I meant, are you going to date her? Over the past few years, you've gone out with a lot of beautiful women. I don't think you even missed me. Did you plan to make me jealous so you could have some fun?" I put down my glass and looked into her blue eyes. They seemed to shine. We sat in silence for about 15 seconds while I thought of what to say. "Nice try, Tracy. But I remember a time when you had fun with others while we were still married. You never told me why you treated me badly. I would have been happy to grow old with you. Are we still going to talk about your idea?" she interrupted. I was shocked. My mouth fell open as I looked at her. "Okay, I made a mistake. A huge mistake." Tracy sighed. I was scared of getting old, so I went after a younger guy to prove I could still attract men, but it was really just a physical thing. I enjoyed the thrill of a younger man wanting me. At the time, I didn't see how I was comparing him to you. You just seemed less exciting compared to those younger guys. I thought you were just too nice. But I was wrong. After you left, the fun was gone, and after a bit, the excitement faded away. It felt good to have a younger guy like me, but I felt nothing inside. I cried for a warm hug after being with someone. Have you thought about dating someone your age? Someone who can understand you, even if he can't do the things those guys did? After all, Tracy, you're not 22 anymore either, I said. "That's what I'm trying to do now, Mark," she replied firmly. "We had 30 good years together. Can you forgive my bad choice and be with me again, please?" Tears filled Tracy's eyes. Before all of this, I would have held her close to comfort her. Even now, part of me wanted to do that. But now it felt different. 3 years ago, this may have felt like winning. Now it was just a sad apology. I shook my head slowly. First off, we had about 29 good years together. I can't call the last year good. This is real life, Tracy. In real life, we can't fix things. Come on, let's get you home. My time with Wendy Adams was coming to an end. I waited a week to call her after her wedding. We went to a nice seafood place a little way away. She wore a nice dress and men looked at her all night. But unlike Tracy, she didn't notice. She focused only on me. After dinner, we went to her place for drinks and dessert. She poured us cognac and we drank it quickly. Then it was time for dessert. She took my hand and led me to the bedroom upstairs. I noticed it wasn't the main bedroom and it looked like it wasn't used much. I understood why she didn't want to be intimate in the bed she shared with Earl. Wendy didn't need to tell me to be gentle. I felt she hadn't been with many men since Earl passed away. They had truly loved each other. I was kind and slow, starting with soft kisses on her lips as I helped her with her clothes. She then helped me take mine off as I kissed her shoulders and upper chest. Her beautiful chest still had life in it. Tenderness turned into passion, which surprised me. When I finally looked up, she was out of breath. We kissed some more and then lay together until I heard her breathing slow down. She looked like an angel, and I watched her sleep for a long time. In the 3 years since my divorce, I had enjoyed being with different women. But there was something special about this time. Yes, I was happy physically, but I felt a deeper connection with Wendy. I wondered if she felt the same as I drifted into the best sleep I'd had in a long time. Waking up in a strange bed had become normal for me, but this morning felt different. It was like waking up on a cozy Sunday morning with Tracy making breakfast downstairs and our kids playing nearby. But there was no Tracy, no kids, just Wendy cooking bacon. I could smell coffee, too. I put on a t-shirt and pants. I didn't care about anything else. Then I saw my shirt. Wendy was wearing it, with the sleeves rolled up and some buttons undone. My shirt had never looked so good. "Hey, I hope you don't mind I borrowed your shirt. It smelled like you, and I wanted to keep that scent around for a while," she said. "How about breakfast?" I asked. "Can a hungry man get a little attention?" She moved closer as I opened my arms to hug her tightly. She smelled just like the night before, and I couldn't imagine a better scent. We ate and talked about our plans for the day. It was Saturday, so we had all day to do whatever we wanted. We never talked about what I would do or what she would do. We talked about what we both would do together. We made a few plans, but then I had a very exciting idea. "How about we get married today?" I asked. "You have a great mind," she replied. "I will do whatever you think is best." It was that easy. I knew the local justice of the peace worked on Saturdays, so I called to see if he could meet us at 4 p.m. And just like that, we had a little over 7 hours to get ready for our wedding. I needed a best man, and Wendy's son, Aaron, was happy to help. Once I told him the bride was his mother, he said he, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter would drive an hour to be there. Wendy called her mom and asked her to be the maid of honor. When she asked, her mom cried and happily said yes. I also called my daughters and invited April, Robert, Allison, and whoever she wanted to bring along. "Should I ask my mom to come?" she teased. "Only if you really want to," I said. "But I'd rather you didn't. She has had a tough time lately, and I don't want to seem like I'm showing off my good luck." One of my good friends owned a nice restaurant in town, so I called him and asked if his banquet room was free. He agreed to let us use it, so I booked the room for the day. We then invited a few friends to celebrate with us. Before I went to buy engagement rings, Tracy was leaving her favorite shop when she almost bumped into Wendy on the sidewalk. Though they were not as close as before, they had been friends for about 25 years. They chatted happily for a few minutes until Tracy noticed 2 rings on Wendy's hand. "Wow, those are beautiful," Tracy said, surprised. Wendy blushed, and then Tracy's eyes widened. "Are you married to Mark now?" Tracy looked a little dizzy, and Wendy helped her stay steady. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry," Tracy quickly said. "We haven't talked about it much. It all happened so fast." "Fast? I don't know the Mark I used to know," Tracy replied. "Have you ever felt everything was so perfect that you just had to act?" Wendy added, "I mean, who would let someone like him go?" Wendy quickly put her hand over her mouth and said, "That's not what I meant." "It's okay," Tracy assured her. "Trust me, I know I made mistakes. Watch out and don't let this man slip away. There are good guys out there, but they aren't easy to find." Tracy complained about this to her therapist, Dr. Ellen McForrest. "They seem to disappear when I need them most. I thought I could find someone great. But then they were gone," she said. "You are smart, Mrs. Robertson. You should have known there are not many good men out there at your age, and you can't just keep enjoying the fun without thinking of a future with someone," the doctor replied. "Real life can be tough sometimes," Tracy sighed. "I'm standing on the back porch of the house Wendy and I bought after we got married 10 years ago. For many reasons, we wanted a home of our own. It's a small house with just 2 bedrooms, but it has a big living room and family room, so there's room for our 3 kids and their families. Already, we are proud grandparents 6 times. I am grilling when Wendy comes outside with 2 glasses of whiskey. She gives me one and I kiss her gently. I can't help but think how she looks much younger than 63. She still takes care of herself, though her light brown hair has some gray. But she still turns heads when she gets dressed for our nights out. We may be older, but we're still young at heart. Actually, we still have fun twice a week and even enjoy a quick moment in the shower. Life is good thanks to medical advances. Even though I love Tracy, I can't imagine my life without Wendy. She won my heart in a way that Tracy never could. In a strange way, I feel thankful for the pain Tracy caused. Without it, I wouldn't have found this joy with Wendy. I see Tracy every few months, but she doesn't look well. She often seems sad and always apologizes. I think about how to say thank you, but never do. At 65, Tracy has lost some of her former shape, but with a good bra, it's not too clear. As she walks through the mall, she notices that men don't pay her much attention anymore. While heading to her car, she sees Mark coming towards her. She stands tall as he gets near. "Hello, beautiful," he says, leaning down to kiss her cheek. Tracy blushes at the kind words. They chat for a few moments about their grandchildren until Mark decides it's time to leave. He knows what will happen next. "I'm really sorry," Tracy says. Mark looks deeply into her eyes, hesitates, then smiles without a word. He gets in his car and drives away, continuing with his life. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.